Hello and welcome to My Mom's Basement, presented by Barstool Sports. I am your host, Robbie Fox, and this is a very special MCU refresher edition of My Mom's Basement, catching you up on everything you need to know before seeing Captain America: Brave New World in theaters worldwide this week. Whether you just need a quick reminder on the events leading up to this movie, or you only know the broad strokes prior, this will hopefully provide enough to heighten your knowledge and enjoyment levels a little bit more going in. So let's waste no more time and get right into it, starting with the heroes. Captain America: Brave New World is the fourth film in the franchise, but it will be the first installment featuring Sam Wilson's Captain America, played by Anthony Mackie, and not Steve Rogers, played by Chris Evans. I assume you all remember Steve Rogers, right? Saved the world more than once. I don't need to recap all of that, do I? Steve Rogers passed the mantle and the shield of Captain America down to his protege, Sam Wilson, then known as the Falcon, at the end of Avengers Endgame, after using a time travel device to go back to the 40s to spend the rest of his years with the love of his life, Peggy Carter. I know that may sound a bit complicated if you're a first timer, but I'm not sure that'll actually wind up being important here, so disregard it. That is, unless old Steve Rogers is revealed to actually be hiding out on the moon. Just kidding, I think. We first met Sam Wilson in Captain America and the Winter Soldier back in 2014, where he and Steve Rogers became quick friends after sharing a morning jog in a now iconic scene. Sam was a pararescue airman soldier now working at a VA hospital who was one of the only allies Steve could trust after the government and S.H.I.E.L.D. was infiltrated by an evil organization known as Hydra. He's highly trained in aerial combat and flight and uses high-tech mechanical wings attached to a military backpack, and despite having no superpowers or super soldier serum, which we'll get to later, he has proven he can stand toe-to-toe with other superheroes time and time again. Sam and Steve form an incredibly tight bond as the movie goes on, and they endure multiple missions together against Hydra and the mysterious Winter Soldier, who of course winds up being a brainwashed version of Steve Rogers' best friend from World War II, Bucky Barnes. Wilson plays a major factor in helping Captain America and Natasha Romanoff stop Hydra, and then aids the Avengers and eventually joins that team in Age of Ultron. But unfortunately, he got to the party just as everyone was leaving, and the Avengers would officially split over a moral disagreement in Captain America: Civil War. Sam only really got to do one thing as an Avenger, and it was play security guard at Avengers HQ when Scott Lang showed up to steal some equipment in the first Ant-Man. After the events of Avengers: Age of Ultron led to the accidental death of civilians, though, the United States government wanted to register and regulate all superheroes under the Sokovia Accords, to which Tony Stark agreed, but Steve Rogers, just having battled a corrupt government, was very much against it. Sam Wilson sided with Steve, and after it was decided that talking it out wasn't going to solve this conflict, the Avengers had a full-on brawl in an empty airport where Sam fought against the likes of Iron Man, Spider-Man, Black Panther, Vision, Natasha, and War Machine. Things only got worse from there when Rhodey, aka War Machine, was paralyzed in this battle, and Bucky was revealed as the killer of Tony Stark's parents later on. To make matters worse, Steve Rogers knew this deep dark secret about Bucky Barnes, but kept it quiet as Bucky was under Soviet mind control at the time and didn't know what he was doing. This all leads to the harsh breakup of the Avengers and sends Captain America on the run with Sam Wilson, Natasha Romanoff, and Bucky Barnes, with the Secretary of State, Thaddeus E. Ross, on the hunt for the rebelling heroes. We'll get to him in a bit. About 2 years later, our band on the run had to come out of hiding and reform the Avengers when an intergalactic mad titan named Thanos threatened the entire universe. Well, actually, only half the universe, but still, not good. This movie doesn't go too well for our guy Sam Wilson, as the disjointed Avengers ultimately failed to stop Thanos from collecting the Infinity Stones, making him one of the most powerful beings in the universe. And with a snap of his finger, half of all life disintegrates. Falcon was one of the poor souls on the wrong side of that coin toss, along with Spider-Man, Black Panther, Bucky Barnes, Doctor Strange, and every Guardian of the Galaxy except for Rocket and Nebula. Sam would then remain deceased for 5 years in-universe until the remaining Avengers convinced Tony Stark to try to save the universe one last time, and he figured out time travel, which led to them retracing their steps in a way to beat Thanos to collecting those Infinity Stones. Once they were successful, a counter snap from the Incredible Hulk brought everyone back, including Sam Wilson, in arguably the greatest scene in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, a callback to his first appearance in that morning jog scene. The Avengers, of course, then win that battle thanks to the sacrifice of Iron Man, R.I.P. my dog Tony Stark, and from there, Steve Rogers is sent on a mission to return the Infinity Stones to where they were pulled from in the Marvel timeline during Endgame. That's when he decides to stick around in the late 40s to live out his life with Peggy Carter, his soulmate. And when he returns, only moments have passed for the other Avengers, but he's an old man having lived a complete life. That's when he passes down the shield to Sam Wilson in a truly touching moment. It isn't as easy as just putting the suit on and becoming Captain America for Sam Wilson, though. In The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Sam really struggles with the responsibility of taking up the mantle and living up to the legacy of Steve Rogers. He actually donates the shield to the Smithsonian, showing a real reluctance to become Captain America, and that leads to the government rushing to introduce their own Captain America, named John Walker. While this is going on, an anarchist group called the Flag Smashers, who believe the world was better when half the universe disappeared, start causing chaos all over the world, which leads Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes to once again team up. Their relationship grows a lot throughout the series, and they also reintroduced Baron Zemo, the villain from Captain America Civil War here, in a much more likable role. It'd be pretty cool to see him make a small cameo in Brave New World. But anyway, this new Captain America, John Walker, is also on the hunt for these Flag Smashers, many of which are enhanced with the very super soldier serum that made Steve Rogers into Cap in the first place. And after John Walker's partner is killed in the line of duty, he snaps and brutally murders a criminal with the shield. Blood is dripping off of it. It's a pretty gnarly moment, I'm not going to lie. Very metal. John Walker is then stripped of the Captain America title, and then he becomes known as U.S. Agent. Eventually, he takes the super soldier serum himself after scoring some from a mysterious figure called the Power Broker, who we later find out is Peggy Carter's niece, Sharon. I actually forgot to mention, Captain America made out with her before. Kind of weird. Us Cap guys mostly ignore that. The super soldier serum is never taken by Sam, which is a bit polarizing in the comic book movie community. Some view it as noble and awesome that he doesn't even need powers, while others wonder why he isn't juiced to the gills at all times, especially if he's going to have to take on, I don't know, a Hulk in the future. Let's hope he never comes into contact with one of those guys. Sam eventually realizes he's ready to become Captain America by the end of the series and wins over the people with a big speech. And it's not perfectly done, but honestly, between you and me, I liked it a lot. I also love this Captain America suit, which is unfortunately being changed in the new movie because Anthony Mackie said he hated wearing that cowl. But come on, man, it looked amazing. Along the way, Sam Wilson meets two guys worth talking about here, especially ahead of Captain America Brave New World, the first being Joaquin Torres, played by Danny Ramirez. Torres is introduced as a lieutenant in the U.S. Air Force who works alongside Sam, and their relationship is definitely supposed to mirror that of Sam Wilson and Steve Rogers. By the end of the season, he picks up Sam's old broken wings, and we know from the trailers that he will now become the new Falcon. The other name we have to talk about is Isaiah Bradley. Isaiah Bradley was an unwilling super soldier serum test subject who was sent after the Winter Soldier during the Korean War. He got so close that he actually ripped the metal arm off of him, but he ultimately failed, and the United States government was so worried about the ramifications of his existence that they put him into prison for decades. Once he was there, he was experimented on and treated horribly by all but one nurse who helped him fake his death and escape in the 1980s. Bucky and Sam found him in Baltimore with a grandson named Eli in this series and ultimately got his heroic duties acknowledged and recognized in the Smithsonian. It appears that in Captain America Brave New World, Isaiah Bradley will be making an attempt to assassinate the president for some unknown reason. I suspect he's under some sort of mind control. But speaking of that president, let's get into the villains of Brave New World. Remember Secretary of State Thaddeus E. Ross, better known as Thunderbolt Ross? I mentioned him before. He was the one on the hunt for the heroes who didn't agree to the Sokovia Accords in Civil War. Thunderbolt Ross is now known as President Ross in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and unfortunately, due to the death of William Hurt, he's had to be recast here. Luckily, they found a very suitable replacement in Harrison Ford, and there's a pretty good nod to the recasting in one of the trailers, keeping on the tradition set in Iron Man 2.
I have to admit, I'm still getting used to the new look.
They said lose the mustache or lose the election.
Believe it or not, Thunderbolt Ross is a Red Hulk. He became a Red Hulk in the comics in 2008 during a run by Jeff Loeb and Ed McGuinness, and a Red Hulk is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. He's the Hulk, but red and hot. In the comics, the identity of the Red Hulk is hidden for a bit, but it doesn't look like that'll be the case here, considering President Ross transforms right on the White House lawn. Ross's daughter, Betty, played by Liv Tyler, will also return to the MCU here for the first time since appearing in The Incredible Hulk in 2008. Betty is a scientist who had a bit of a fling with Bruce Banner back in the day, and she's actually the lucky lady who marries him in the comics. She and her father didn't get along so well when we last saw her, and something tells me that probably hasn't changed. I think she'll align with Sam and the good guys here and help take down her dad. Who knows? Maybe she even rekindles things with Bruce somewhere down the line. Think she'll be confused about why he looks like Mark Ruffalo now? Another returning character from the Ed Norton Incredible Hulk film is Tim Blake Nelson's Dr. Samuel Stearns. Samuel Stearns developed a temporary cure for Bruce in that movie and turned Tim Roth into the Abomination. And when some of Bruce's blood got into an open wound on his head, his brain saw a wild mutation that made him insanely smart. This was a tease back in 2008 that he'd eventually turn into the green-skinned, big-headed, genius comic book villain called the Leader, and they're finally following up on it here. I'm not positive, but I think the Leader will play as big, if not a bigger role in this movie as the Red Hulk when it comes to villains and their screen time. We also know that Giancarlo Esposito's Sidewinder will get in the way of Sam Wilson and our heroes at some point, but being Sidewinder looks like this in the comics and this in the movie, I'd assume the name is all Giancarlo Esposito will have in common with the character. The last thing I'll mention is that giant thing coming out of the ocean you might have seen in various promotional clips. It's something called the Celestial from a movie called The Eternals. It rose out of the Indian Ocean in that movie and threatened Earth. The superhero team called the Eternals stopped it. It's kind of just been sitting there ever since. Marvel is now saying that it's made out of adamantium, the metal made famous by Wolverine's bones. So it seems like this could offer some sort of backdoor mutant introduction. I don't know. Never forget that random article in She-Hulk that kind of teased Wolverine either. That's about it, though. That should have you more than ready for Captain America Brave New World. I think you're so ready Sam Wilson might pass down the shield to you at the end of this movie. Just kidding. But seriously, where do you think Steve Rogers is? Do you think he's on the moon? Think that old geezer's just down in Florida, retired somewhere? I don't know. Let us know in the comments down below. Where do you think Steve Rogers is? And enjoy Captain America Brave New World in theaters this week.